time for my wife. I told somebody, I said, we're kind of going through a period of time. Those of you who saw the movie Groundhog Day, that's kind of, for the last week, all I've done is put stuff in boxes, and put stuff in boxes, and put stuff in boxes. So we're transitioning for our, and we're going to keep a little place in Austin. You know, I tell people, I said, for 150 plus years, the T-Sips, the Bears, the Red Raiders have kept an Aggie out of the governor's mansion. And so I decided I was going to stay there as long as I could. So 14 plus years of being there in the governor's mansion and watching Texas A&M during that period of time as well, and hopefully being able to influence a little bit of what's going on. And David Eller, who's the former chairman of our Board of Regents, and I think you served as a chancellor for a while as well. And David, who worked in the biotech arena and still does, he saw the same thing that I've seen over this decade. And one of the things we're so proud of our institution, most of us, because it changed our lives. I mean, if you think about where you are today, and you would be an odd person to say that you don't find yourself at this particular juncture in life, but by the grace of God, and you're attending Texas A&M University. It's true. You know, whether it's old Army class of 45 over here, or I think did you win for being the, was there anybody above, or
244s.
244s, Mr. Epstein. I'm sorry, sir. I'll have to do some, they'll crap me out after the deal here. But to all of you, thank you for your service. I was looking back at my old Texas Aggie magazine the other day, and it was from probably a decade ago. I don't even remember why I kept it, but I put a note on the front of it that it said, look at Silver Taps and see the classes of 40 through 45 in particular, and how many of those guys who were passing away, and almost every one of them spent their time in the military in that period of time. And that's, that's one of our great histories, and part of our part of the foundation of that institution. It was all male, all military, and we developed more officers for World War II than the academies combined. I mean, the fascinating history of Texas A&M, and the men and now the women who have come along and served in various and sundry roles. I shared with his class that was just graduating, and it's Matt, right? Matthew Johnson.
Yes.
Petroleum engineer. What a time to be graduating with petroleum engineer. When I told him, I said, hey man, this is up and down world that we live in out there. Everything's going to be good. 3.8 grade point ratio. This is a smart one. So those of you who are looking for a good petroleum engineer, here he is today. I want you to come up here and talk to him. Seriously. Sammy, there may be a relationship built there between what you guys are doing and what Matthew's going to be doing, but the future's bright. The future's bright if you got a degree from Texas A&M, just like it always has been. And what the school has done. So David was there, class of '59. I showed up about 7 or 8 years later, just as they were making this transition from all male, all military to co-education and non-compulsory corps cadets. I'm still looking for the women. There weren't any women there in 1968.
Born in '59.
And then I looked in my yearbook, and it's populated. There's ladies all through there, but they didn't have any dormitories on campus. So we never saw, and I was animal science major. Actually, I went to school to be a veterinarian. I went 4 semesters actually, And then organic chemistry helped me make a transition in my life to become an aviator. I went to see Dr. A. Price. Those of you who knew Dr. Price, he wore these big horn-rimmed glasses. And into your sophomore year, you walk in, and they got called out to vet school, and I was thinking, well, maybe they're not looking for somebody that just spends all the time in the book, someone with some practical experience, who's worked on a farm, who's worked for a veterinarian, and that they're going to allow me to go to vet school because I had all this really great practical experience. And, I knew my grades weren't just sterling, but he said, Perry, he never actually looked up. He just was bringing them in. And he said, Perry, you don't really want to be a veterinarian, do you? I said, Dr. Price, that's all I ever wanted to be. I mean, I grew up in Paint Creek, Texas. Every summer I'd go in and work with a veterinarian. That's all that was my goal in life, was to be a veterinarian. And I laid that all on him, man, as passionately as I could. He said, son, I'm looking at your transcript. You don't want to be a veterinarian. He said, see O.D. Butler over at the Animal Science Department. They got a place for you over there. So anyway, that kind of changed my life's trajectory, but it all worked out all right. But I want to share with you from that what has happened at the school we think so grand over the course of the last decade. There are two institutions in America that do $1 billion worth of research every year. MIT and Cal Berkeley. Within the next 72 months, there will be a third institution in America that does over $1 billion worth of research, and it's Texas A&M University. That has happened because of the commitment of the leadership. I will suggest to you, having men and women in the right places in the legislature. It did not hurt to have Steve Ogden, who was the Senate Finance Chairman for about 6 years, and Tommy Williams, who was the Senate Finance Chairman for the next 4 years after that. It didn't hurt to have those people in place. And I might add, it didn't hurt to have an Aggie governor who was daily looking for ways to be able to help that institution. And during that period of time, we saw this collective foundation built that's been unlike anything that this state has seen in that decade and a period of time. And it was a vision, and it goes back to conversations that we had about why does the state of Texas not have a pharmaceutical industry? When I was the agriculture commissioner, I was just curious about, on the East Coast and the West Coast, there were these communities of interest, if you will, these incubators, where the pharmaceutical industry was growing. Over in the Research Triangle and Raleigh-Durham area, up in that Boston area, over on the West Coast. But we didn't have any manufacturing of pharmaceuticals. I was always intrigued with that, Matthew. Why do we not have that? And I had a PhD researcher from out at El Paso explain it to me to where I could actually understand it. It was that we didn't have the foundation in Texas. We didn't have the types of facilities that you need for foundational work. And I found that to be interesting, and I never forgot the conversation when I was elected lieutenant governor, and then 2 years later elevated to the governorship. I found myself in a place where I could make a difference. And Guy Dietrich, who was one of my running buddies, who was a Texas Aggie class of about 86, I think, who had gone on and created his own technology company, had sold it and had a nice little family foundation set up where he could pretty much go do what he wanted to do. And he wanted to teach, and he wanted to be involved with developing technology in Texas. And he really gave me the blueprint, if you will, to start putting into place foundations with the ultimate goal of being the manufacturing of pharmaceuticals in the state of Texas. And it started, interestingly enough, and you'll remember you held that Houston Chronicle paper up, when we put $50 million into the Texas Institute of Genomic Medicine. This was mapping the mouse genome. And they were like, oh man, leave it to the Aggies to spend $50 million on mice.
Yeah.
And they had lots of fun with that. And we faced all the heat and all the criticism and all of the things that go along with short-sighted people not understanding what the long view was. Some 2 years later, we helped fund the Texas Institute of Preclinical Studies. And then another 2 years past that, the Texas Center for Therapeutic Medicine, which basically was the manufacturing side of vaccines. Those foundational entities helped create the structure in the state of Texas for a multi-billion-dollar pharmaceutical industry that is now coming into Bryan College Station. They signed a multi-hundreds of millions of dollar contract with the federal government to develop vaccines for terroristic threats and pandemic events like flus that impact the world. And there's two things here. Number one, the massive amount of wealth that gets created by this type of a structure. The people that are going to have jobs, that are graduating from college with those technology backgrounds, that are going to be able to stay in Texas and to really contribute to this state's well-being. But it's also about what each of us really are about. Why we went to Texas A&M. Because it is a place that develops people who make a difference in the world. You see, that vision and that structure is now created in this state a platform of which pharmaceuticals will be manufactured. Pharmaceuticals that have the potential to save hundreds of thousands of lives. Because prior to this being put into place, it took about 9 months to go from one strain to another strain. Say we had H1N1 and H1N7, and that strain mutated, which happens in the real world. It took 9 months with our old traditional way of building vaccines to this new concept that was created at Texas A&M, where you can change from one strain to another in less than 4 months. An amazing compression of time. And when you start thinking about that in the global sense, 9 months of a disease raging around the world in a third world environment could literally kill hundreds of thousands of people. And your beloved university, Texas A&M, is continuing to change the world and to serve people around the globe. That's what you're a part of. That's the part of the legacy that you have as a graduate of that institution. So I want to wrap up and share with you they kept us out of the governor's mansion for 150 plus years. and I've given some thought about that. What is it that we remind future governors and future citizens of this state that Texas A&M is all about? So I scratched my head and I was like, well, what can be here for a long time? Well, you all recall the governor's mansion was going through a little small, well, not small, it was a pretty substantial remodeling. Electrical, plumbing, they were going to put a fire suppression system in the mansion. Built in 1856, and it did not have a fire suppression system in it. Stunning. I don't know how it lasted that long, frankly. I mean, you think about all the open fireplaces, they had the attached kitchen. So during that process, some anarchist broke into the construction site and nearly burned the mansion down. I always thought that was kind of an ironic thing that it's going through this process to have a fire suppression system and the guy tries to burn the place down. And they spent a huge amount of money remodeling it. So in 100 years, when they're remodeling the governor's mansion again, they will find all kinds of Aggie paraphernalia behind the walls, in the foundation, buried underneath parts of the mansion. And they'll also find something else. Tomorrow, at 4:30, we will unveil a little plaque that's beside a oak tree that's about that tall now. I planted it there a year ago, and it was this tall. It is happy. It is a happy tree. It is growing. Its roots are going down. It will be there for 100+ years. And it is the progeny of the century oak from Texas A&M University. And so the plaque basically says that this tree is the progeny of the century oak tree at Texas A&M University. To honor the service of all Aggies, past, present, and future. And then, once we get that done, we're going to drink beer. And while we're having a cold beer in the governor's mansion, there is an old tradition that goes back to the 1950s. Governor Price Daniels' wife decided it would be a thoughtful process to take a memento from every governor's family and leave it in the governor's mansion. Those of you, how many of you have visited the governor's mansion before? And there's Lawrence Sullivan Ross. There is a porcelain platter that's displayed in a fairly substantial case in the large parlor. There's a collection of items from Sam Houston. Every governor in the history of this state leaves something as a reflection of who they were, their family, prior to 1957, David. Edmund J. Davis, in the conservatory, there's a nice break front that's a display of almost all modern day governors. And when I say modern day, I want to say it goes back to Alan Shivers and goes on up. With the exception of one, there's a saber. There's a saber in that break front. And it belonged to a Union general. But think about how odd that is. In a state that belonged to the Confederacy, there is a Union general saber. And the reason is because Edmund J. Davis, who was a lawyer and a judge from Webb County, didn't believe that Texas ought to be joining this confederacy. He was just like Sam Houston. Sam Houston gave up his governorship over that. These were principled men. And Grant chose Davis to come back and be a Reconstruction governor. Matter of fact, Edmund J. Davis was the last Republican governor in Texas history until 1978, when Bill Clements was elected to office. But Edmund J. Davis's saber is in that collection. There's a Longhorn in there, in that collection, that belonged to Doc Briscoe. And it's pretty reflective of who Doc Briscoe was. Largest ranch in contiguous fence, and student body president at the University of Texas. So he put this bronze Longhorn in there. Tomorrow, I will leave some. In 1978, I had moved home. Now, I'm not sure is there a more beloved, important, this is more important than my diploma. This is more important than my Aggie boots. Don't worry, I'm not leaving this. This is my third ring. My first one, when you're in the Air Force, you cannot be on the flight deck with any jewelry. So I always knew where my ring was. Zipped right there in my flight suit. Was all around the world. Came home. I wore it on my right hand at that particular point in time. I got hung up on a piece of machinery at the farm. So I started taking my ring off, put it in my pocket. And cheap boy didn't have new jeans, and they had a hole in them, and somehow or another I lost my Aggie ring in 1978. So, and this was at the farm, so I know where it is. It's somewhere on X numbers of thousands of acres out there somewhere. And I kept thinking, I'll find my Aggie ring. Well, I made it to 1982, and the girl that I'd been pursuing for a long time finally agreed to get married to me, and I could not get married without my Aggie ring. So I ordered another ring. And I said my wedding vows with my Aggie ring in my pocket, and off to live happily ever after. And lost it and my wedding band 6 weeks later. Not good. My wife could have cared less about my Aggie ring. She wanted to know what in the hell I did with that wedding band. And we lived in a 20-foot by 30-foot house. Yes, sir, you heard that right. 600 square foot of honeymoon bliss. If you ever want to know how much my wife loved me, you need to go down and see that little house we lived in. It was cedar block house, 20 foot by 30 foot, one room. If you wanted to get away, you either went outside or the bathroom door did close. Other than that, kitchen, living room, bedroom, all one room. How do you lose your wedding band and your Aggie ring in a 20 foot by 30 foot room? I searched that place high and low, thought of every place we could have been, but it was gone. So I got this third ring and a wedding band very quickly. And so they've been with me ever since. I don't take my wedding band off anymore, and the Aggie ring doesn't go off very much either. In 1991, I was elected agriculture commissioner. We were moving out of Haskell, Texas, and to Austin, taking a 7-year-old and a 4-year-old, and I was getting rid of stuff that I didn't need anymore, and I had a couch that I'd bought in '75 when I was in the Air Force and had been in, I can't tell you how many other places, and it's worn out, literally worn out, threadbare. The legs had been hammered back on and clenched. Had it up on its side going out the back door of this house, and Sydney, the 4-year-old, class of '09, saw behind the cheesecloth a Play-Doh lid, red. I want that Play-Doh. Sydney, give me a break. It's a Play-Doh. Weird. I knew I was going to lose the conversation. So, took the pliers, stuck my hand down through 15 years of stuff. And as I got to the Play-Doh lid, my hand hit something hard. My second Aggie. Right there. Tore it apart, looking for the wedding band, still couldn't find it. I mean, literally tore this thing apart. But I had my second Aggie ring back. And so I always had that ring with me on each of my inaugurals. I've had this one on, second one in here, and it's always been in my desk at in the governor's office for these 14 years. In about 2006, I was here in Houston doing a little book signing. And one of the guys that came through, it was a Boy Scout book, and a fella came by with his 2 young scouts. He was a scoutmaster, and he also is a fairly well-known Aggie, the first Aggie astronaut, Mike Fossum. And Mike said, while we were signing the book, "You got anything you want to go to space?" I was kind of like, "Yeah, I do." So he got that second Aggie ring that had been lost. It was almost biblical, and then it was found. And he went to space. He took it on whichever STS that he was the commander of. So Mike took it to space, brought it back. And then last year, who is the historian in here? When did ring dunking become? I mean, that's New Army, right? 80s? Does anybody know? I mean, somebody's got to know. Mid-90s? Okay, yeah. That was kind of a new thing for me. Was it earlier than that? Earlier. So what you're telling me is you did it, right? Yeah. Okay. So the man who does the landscape work at the Capitol and the governor's mansion is a native of Mexico. He's a first-generation American. His son, first generation to go to college. Alex Medrano, regimental commander. So when he got his ring, they were telling me that he was going to do his ring dunking. So I sent that second ring to go participate in his ring dunking. Now he's a little bit different than some of the other kids that I've, in the sense of his liquid that he put in his mug or pitcher, whatever. What did you use, a pitcher or mug? Pitcher. You were old Army. Was holy water, blessed by the priest over in East Austin. So anyway, tomorrow at 5 o'clock, that second ring will be placed along with Lawrence Sullivan Ross's platter, Edmund J. Davis's saber in the collection, so that no matter who comes through there, they will know that after 150 plus years, there has been an Aggie governor. So anyway, we'll have some fun with it. thank you all for letting me come and to participate today. The footprint of this institution continues to get bigger and bigger around the world. It truly is. When they created those two institutions, the Constitution called for universities of the first class. Well, let me share with you one thing. We've done our part. Texas A&M is indeed a university of the first class. God bless you, gig 'em, and God bless America.